Conspiracy Unlimited with Richard Syrett.
On this episode of Conspiracy Unlimited, the octopus of global control, the staggering corruption and criminal collusion between our governments, the mainstream media, and the multinational corporations.
Obama put a guy in charge of science, a guy named John P. Holdren. In 1977, he wrote a book called Eugenics and the Depopulation Agenda. I'm not kidding. These are the points in his book. Number one, women could be forced to abort their pregnancies whenever they wanted to. The population at large could be sterilized by infertility drugs intentionally put into the nation's drinking water and in food. Gee, I wonder if that's happened. Single mothers and teen mothers should have their babies seized from them against their will and given away to other couples. People who contribute to social deterioration, whatever that means, can be required by law to exercise reproductive responsibility. In other words, they could be compelled to have abortions or be sterilized.
This podcast is brought to you by Family Bunker Designs. If you believe things are headed in a scary direction these days, then you'll want to listen to this message. 4 years ago, John Hartman, a retired military man and certified disaster and survival expert, created the ultimate solution to keep his family safe from danger. He built a family survival bunker. With the advice of experts, he decided to share what he'd learned and publish the ultimate guide to family bunker construction. His designs are highly affordable, yet your family bunker will be safe, well hidden, and strong enough to withstand almost any disaster or terrorist attack. These days, with so many threats out there, a safe hideout is essential for security. And right now, when you order the Family Bunker Guide, you'll get 3 bonus survival guides absolutely free. Don't put it off. Get this life-saving information now. Learn more at clearbroadcast.com. That's clearbroadcast.com.
Conspiracy Unlimited with Richard Syrett. Pursuing the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from his studio beneath the stairs, here's Richard Syrett.
Now, I'm not one to believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. So get this. Today, I wake up and I throw on a T-shirt. I actually did it in the dark. And it was only after I stepped out into the hallway under a skylight that I realized I'd put on one of my favorites. It's my Spectre T-shirt. You know Spectre. This is the criminal organization in the James Bond movies. Spectre. It's an acronym. It stands for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. And the symbol, get this, the symbol for this organization is an octopus. Well, how fitting. Because my guest is the author of a book called The Octopus of Global Control. Wow, of all the T-shirts for me to blindly pull out of the wardrobe, I chose that one. You expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die. Anyway, The Octopus of Global Control is a controversial nonfiction book, and it details how those in position of power are able to manipulate society for their benefit and why they believe that they're entitled to impose their warped worldview of reality on mankind and how we can break free from their grip. The 8 tentacles of control that are wrapped around humanity include the military, governmental, covert, physical, financial, media, spiritual, and scientific. And this book tackles topics such as uncovering the deep state, false flag terror events, the media's role in manufacturing wars, the 9/11 deception, the fraud of central banking, our broken education system, the use of religion to shape society, the corrupted medical industry, and so forth. The Octopus of Global Control also includes first-hand observations, quotes from over 500 witnesses and participants that were involved in the most important events in our history. And it's cool because these words add context and help to really paint a picture of these historic events by explaining who these people were, what they said, why it matters, and what actually happened. And I'm very pleased to welcome to Conspiracy Unlimited the author of The Octopus of Global Control, Charlie Robinson. Hey, Charlie, how are you?
I'm great, Richard. Thanks for having me.
The Octopus of Global Control. This is fascinating. The octopus is a fascinating creature, but you lay it out so well. Explain to the listeners why, when we're talking about the New World Order, why the octopus is such an appropriate analogy.
It really is. You've got an animal that is extremely intelligent. By accounts, if an octopus has ventured through a cave in the last 3 years, it remembers it from the feel of it and what it saw. It has the ability to change the way it looks. It has the ability to change the color. It has the ability to change the way it actually feels. It has the ability to squirt ink. It's quick. It can blend in. It's perfect. It can rip you to pieces, or it can vanish, or it can blend in with the scenery. It's actually an impressive animal, but it is the perfect analogy for the New World Order. And it's not that I came up with it. There's been plenty of books about it. But really the quote that started it all, I think, was from John Francis Hyland. He was the mayor of New York City, and it's about 3 paragraphs long, but it's important to read it, so I'm going to read it in its entirety. He said, "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy legs over our cities, states, and nation. To depart from mere generalizations, let me say that at the head of the octopus are the Rockefeller Standard Oil interests and a small group of powerful banking houses generally referred to as the international bankers. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties, write political platforms, make cat's paws of party leaders, use the leading men of private organizations, and resort to every device to place in nomination for high public office only such candidates as will be amenable to the dictates of corrupt big business. These international bankers and Rockefeller Standard Oil interests control the majority of the newspapers and magazines in this country. They use the columns of these papers to club into submission or drive out of office public officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government. It operates under cover of a self-created screen and seizes our executive officers, legislative bodies, schools, courts, newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection." That was 1922.
Right.
What has changed?
Very little.
It's insane. Very little. So this is not new. They described it as an octopus back then because it's fitting. This is a very intelligent group of people that have an agenda, and they'll do what they need to do to put it into play.
And this octopus has made its way into popular culture. I mentioned off the top of the podcast that just by sheer coincidence, I threw on this T-shirt without thinking, and it happened to be my Spectre T-shirt, which is the criminal organization in the James Bond film. Spectre, of course, standing for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. Interesting that they would use the octopus in that movie as a symbol for the criminal organization.
Yeah, and that's not an accident. Of course, the 007 books come out of the MI6. So there was a lot of probably programming that was going on there, putting out into the public through those James Bond films that have done very well, of course, and have sort of redefined the spy, made the spy a hero instead of maybe a scumbag that he possibly could have been. Interesting point.
You begin with a quote from the former mayor of New York, going back almost 100 years, and the book is filled with such quotes. Just there's hundreds of them, hundreds and hundreds.
There's 500. So my thinking was this: there's these important stories need to be told, and I find it really necessary to hear the words of people that were either there, involved in it, or had some sort of involvement in it, whether directly or indirectly. And some of them are politicians, some of them are people that are powerful banking interests and things like that. But some of them are also comedians. You know, I mean,
the great Bill Hicks, the great Bill Hicks,
the great Bill Hicks, and and I have to give Bill Hicks credit because he says, you know, that all marketing people should kill themselves, and I laugh every time because I have a marketing degree and I happen to agree with him. So, all right, Bill, I know I'm trying to not do any harm with my marketing degree, but I get it. And so the point was that I wanted to have the voices from the people that were involved. It's very important. I have my take on it, and that's of course, you know, in the book. But to hear what the people had to say that were directly involved with it. And then the last part of this puzzle, which I think is really necessary and kind of lacking in some of the other books, is, you know, these topics are serious. These are really heavy-duty things, and you can read them or you can study them and get involved in them all day long, and you can really bum yourself out. So I tried as hard as I could to inject a lot of humor in it. Some of it's dark. Well, most of it's dark. But you got to make it through the book. You got to have some fun with it. So, you know, I took liberties with it, and I poked fun at some people that, frankly, I feel needed to be poked fun of. And so I made that as a way to sort of keep you in there a little bit, hold you in, and you see, you know, you kind of laugh a little bit. But I think really more than anything, the book is for people that are new to this. Probably the majority of your listeners are, you know, understand this. This is not news to them, but it might be news to their brother, or it might be news to their sister, or they might have ruined another holiday dinner by bringing up 9/11, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, stop!" So let me be the bad guy. Just slip them the book. It's funny. It tackles a lot of topics. Not everything will resonate with them, but there might be that one thing that catches that they go, "Wait a second, that sounds funny. That shouldn't have happened. That building shouldn't have come down at free falls." You know, there's always that one thing that you go, that just doesn't look right, or that doesn't sound right to me. And then you know how it goes. It becomes a slippery slope after that. So that's what I try to do. Try to have some fun with it and take these really serious topics and try and make them palatable.
Well, you have to laugh, otherwise you'd cry. Number one, particularly, you know, in this arena, it's pretty heady stuff. It's depressing at times, and if you don't learn to laugh, then you will cry. But this is really the divine comedy that we're talking about. These events that are playing out on the world stage. Now, getting back to some of the quotes, one of them you mentioned is from the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, who is someone who has not even alluded, and he was point blank about, you know, the unseen hand that's really controlling and stage managing world events. Disraeli talked about that. Even I read a quote, I believe I first read it in Jim Marrs' book, Ruled by Secrecy, God rest his soul, Jim Marrs.
Yes,
and it was
great Jim Marrs.
A quote attributed to Vladimir Lenin. And he apparently was starting to realize that he was a useful fool. He wasn't sure who was sort of above him on the ladder, but he said something to the effect, "My hands appear to be on the wheel, but I'm not steering this vehicle." I'm paraphrasing, of course.
That's great. But yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the things that as you get into these topics, you start to realize the people that you think are running things are not running things. It does not do them a service. It is not as in their interest to be known. They're behind the scenes because that suits them. They let the politicians in their ego give the illusion that they're running the show. But people are starting to understand that the politicians that make their way up the ladder only do so because they're controllable. They're controllable because they're corrupted. And in the past, it used to be you were cheating on your wife. Then it was maybe this guy's gay. And now it's become, you know, those are sort of things like, well, okay, whatever. Now it's ratcheted up to you've probably got some sort of pedophilia background, and because that is the ultimate taboo, as it should be. And so you get these guys that sort of climb the ladder, and you start to realize that they're scumbags. And yes, they're in power, and they might be very intelligent. In fact, most of them are, but they're more chameleons than anything. But at their core, they're compromised and really disturbed and screwed up people. And they're in that position precisely because of that. Because if you're a pedophile and somebody has it on film, whether it actually happened or they staged it to happen, you're controllable. and you're not going to forever. That's not something you just sort of get let off the hook for. So, I think you're starting to see the lights come on and sort of the cockroaches heading for scurrying away, as they should. And I hope that's what's happening. And I don't know if that is necessarily going to ever sort itself out, but it certainly looks like we might be moving in that direction.
I was thinking, though, that occasionally the owners of the system will actually come out from the shadows, and I don't know why they do this from time to time, and they'll actually they'll run the show in plain daylight. I'm thinking, for example, of the Rockefellers.
Yes.
Was it Winthrop Rockefeller? I think that was the governor of Arkansas. Was it Nelson Rockefeller? Was one of them New York? One of them was senator or governor from West Virginia. They always, with the exception of New York, they often pick. I don't want to say backwater. That's not fair. But what I mean is
it's
these
sort
more
of easy states they can run. They can use a lot of money, and they can pretty much lock it up.
Right. And then I think a case could also be made for Daddy Bush 41. Maybe not an owner of the system, but certainly upper to middle management. Former head of the CIA, doesn't remember where he was on November 22nd, 1963.
Yeah. the only person alive that has amnesia on that day for some reason.
Yes,
he's at the top of my list. I think if I made a list of scumbags, in fact, I did in the book. He's at the top of my list. I mean, he is as evil as you get, and I understand his son George W. Bush gets a lot of the brunt of the criticism, and rightfully so. He's a complete moron, but his dad is the real evil man. His George W. Bush's grandfather should have been hung for treason because he was dealing with the Germans during World War II, and he would only win the bronze medal for worst person in his family. He was like sort of you only dealt with the Germans, so what? But that's a bad family. That's a family of lunatics.
Someone should look into this, and maybe it should be me. I'm a great one to delegate, but because I believe part of the arrangement with Prescott Bush, because he was charged with trading with the enemy under the Trading with the Enemy Act,
right.
That whether there was a plea bargain there, he was sort of stripped of some of his assets, but I thought part of that arrangement was no Bush was ever to run for public office again.
Yeah. I'm sure that maybe that was part of the arrangement, but as you know, they just sort of make up the rules as they go along. Were supposed to happen or not supposed to happen, and they just sort of, I watched Al Gore fold pretty quickly under that presidency. You had that, wow, you fought him for months and months to try and win that, and then you went away pretty quickly without much of a fight. What was that arrangement?
Right.
So I'm sure there's lots of
at least he pretended. He pretended to put up a fight, unlike fellow bonesman John Kerry,
who just rolled right over.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny because when they bring up the if you watch this video, you'll find it. I think it was Tim Russert talking to George Bush, and he was talking about Skull and Bones and John Kerry, and he said something like, "Well, if you lose this election," and George W.'s answer was really quick. He just turned his head and he go, "Oh, we're not going to lose. We're not going to." But it was more than just a confidence. It was as if he knew. We're not going to lose this. The way he said it made me really believe him. Like, oh, listen, we know something you don't know. We're not losing this election. So,
maybe the point there was even if he lost and John Kerry won, he still didn't lose.
Right.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and poor Tim Russert happened to bring that up, and then miraculously wound up dead a week later.
Was it that soon after? A week later? My gosh.
Yeah. Jim or John Kerry. Watch John Kerry squirm when he asks him that question. I don't, asking him about the Skull, 322 or whatever it was, and he's I don't know anything about that. But what I really want to focus on is the climate change. He tries to change the subject. He was very uncomfortable.
Well, I'm going to change the subject just for a moment, Charlie, but unlike the blathering of John Kerry, this is actually important. Internet security. And experts tell us that we should use a different password for every website. But that could be a nightmare. Imagine trying to keep track of all of those passwords for online shopping and banking and email and other essentials. Plus, yes, long, complicated passwords are more secure, but they're very hard to remember. Well, finally, there's a great solution. It's called RoboForm. You never need to remember or type a password ever again. Imagine. RoboForm gives you stronger passwords and faster logins, all with a single click. It keeps all your devices in sync. And when you shop online, get this, RoboForm fills in those long address forms with one click. It's available for Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android for personal or business use. And for peace of mind, RoboForm has around-the-clock support. It's one great solution for online security. Learn more at onegreatsolution.com. That's onegreatsolution.com.
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Then it is violently opposed. Finally, it is accepted as self-evident. Let me just read that again, what that means. Conspiracy Unlimited with Richard Syrett.
Oh, and I almost forgot. Don't forget our weekly contest. We just launched this new contest. All you need to do in order to enter into a weekly draw for a CD, a collection of my Strange Planet feature, is subscribe to the podcast, Conspiracy Unlimited, if you haven't already done so. And then you need to rate and review the podcast and take a screenshot of that. Email it to me at richardsyrett1@gmail.com. Richard Syrett, SYRETT, the numeral 1 @gmail.com. And every Friday, I will draw one of the emails, and that lucky person will receive a Strange Planet Volume 1 or Volume 2 CD, and I'll drop that in the post for you. Charlie Robinson, the author of The Octopus of Global Control, is with us. George Carlin has a great quote that you mentioned in the book, and that has to do with the illusion of choice. Because we were talking about elections, and is it John Kerry or George Bush? Well, it doesn't matter. Both candidates have been approved by the owners, and it's like they've bet on both horses. It doesn't matter. Yeah. This illusion of choice that we have. Do you think that love or hate Trump, maybe this last presidential election cycle, we kind of surprised them up at the top?
I wonder. But if the only thing required is that you give money to the candidate and the candidate will do what you want, why wouldn't you bet on both sides? It would be insane if you went to Las Vegas and bet on, bet on the Patriots and the Seahawks at the same time. You know what I mean? That would be stupid. But if your only intention was to come back and say, I bet on the Super Bowl and I won, you would technically win. So if you're Goldman Sachs and you got $100 million to throw around, you put 50 on one horse and 50 on the other horse, what do you care? At least you finance the winner. Yes, you finance the other guy, but they don't care. That's a write-off. So I think that with Donald Trump, I know that people he's a lunatic. There's no doubt about it. Hillary Clinton was a psychopath, or is a psychopath, and so it was a lose-lose situation as far as I'm concerned. I don't know that Trump threw them for that big of a loop. I'm so convinced that things have been set in motion long in advance that maybe he was just a fluke, but from everything I've learned over the years, I just think, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if it was planned years in advance. Years and years in advance. And when you got Netanyahu, very close friends with Charles Kushner, and you've got the Kushner family, and the Trump family connected through marriage. If that was a long-term plan, it was a hell of a long-term plan. Have the Israelis done things like that before? Absolutely. They're very good at that. So was that set up in advance? Could have been a fluke too. Could have just been luck. But to have Benjamin Netanyahu spending the night at the Kushner house when the younger one was a kid, that's concerning.
You're talking to someone who's kind of a Israel right or wrong guy. I'm a big supporter of the state of Israel, and I applaud, the recognition of Jerusalem. it's just reality. It's been the capital for 2,500 years. But in terms of the long-term planning, I'm with you on that. And I don't know if we'll diverge on this point or not. My feeling is that they don't always get it right. The fact that they're in there trying to manipulate and stage manage, I don't think they have everything locked down yet. That window might be closing.
Right.
I see actually a glimmer of hope with some of these populist uprisings in places like Poland and Hungary. Now, it could get ugly, but it's kind of a Newton's third law. It's kind of an equal and opposite reaction, and things have swung so far, to one side that now that it's sort of correcting, it could get violent, and that's going to be unfortunate.
And I hate to see that. I hate to think about that, but I think you might be right. One thing that does make me think that it might have not gone according to plan was that I really do think that in the United States, the plan was to have Hillary Clinton run against Jeb Bush. That was a guaranteed disaster. And I think that was the plan. And that got blown up because, well, Jeb Bush was just unlikable, and Hillary Clinton has so many skeletons in her closet, it just became sort of unmanageable. And I think the Democrats did themselves a disservice by sort of saying, whatever, she'll win. Like, they weren't being objective about it. Like, she's not a very well-liked individual. So that is one thing that makes me think that maybe the last election was a bit up in the air till the end. But in the end, they've still got money. They still got control. They'll figure it out. They'll sort it out. Even if their guy loses, they'll just find a way to sweeten the pot for the other person and get on their good side. And I hate to see things like that happening in Europe. And I hope that there aren't uprisings, because it always ends badly. But like you said, I mean, something has to be done. You hope it's done peacefully. That'd be the ideal situation. But I think one thing that I am hopeful about is it's not a new invention, but really the internet is opening people's eyes to a lot of things. There is a lot of disinformation out there for sure, and that is to be understood and acknowledged and sort of accounted for. But this flow of information is unbelievable, and for people to be able to get online and communicate with other people, to research, to find information that's out there, and not have to go to your library when it's 30 below, you get the opportunity to explore your world a little bit more, and then yet at the same time the downside is it kind of puts you in front of your computer all the time, which is maybe not the greatest thing either. So
where is the power center these days, where these elites? I mean, people say, well, it's the American government is evil and so forth. I don't think it. I think there are foot soldiers in what has become known as the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy in the United States. But I think the people that are pulling the strings have no allegiance. I don't even think we would call them Americans. They're internationalists, as David Rockefeller referred to himself.
Exactly. Like I was just going to say, the David Rockefeller quote from his biography or from his autobiography, talking about, if my family has been accused of being internationalists, that and if these are the charges, I stand proud, that I am. So you might want to, the people might want to listen to him. He is saying, I have no allegiance to this country. And that's fine. If that's his deal, that's his deal. I get it. Their family's in business. They go about things the wrong way, for sure. But they're in business. They're about exploring new markets. And, I get that. But the internationalists. I think the core is in the banking. I think that they have, you've got these three really unusual places in the world. You've got Washington, D.C., the Vatican, and the City of London, not to be confused with London, but the City of London, which is inside London, a very small place.
Right, that has its own police force and
they have their own
right.
police force. They have their own. I mean, there's also a lot of really weird things. They all have obelisks there. They all have very, Freemasonic sort of setups in terms of streets, and it's an unusual place. But they're sort of like, in the United States, we're 50 states plus the District of Columbia. Well, nobody really remembers that, but that is actually where Washington, D.C. is. They have their own set of rules. It's a very unusual thing, and nobody denies it, but they don't promote it either. So I think that had been set up a long time ago to be sort of Vatican takes care of the spiritual side, City of London takes care of the banking. Washington, D.C. takes care of the military. I don't know if that was exactly the plan, but it sort of seems to feel that way. But I think they might have outgrown that, and they're much bigger than that now. And I think the ties that bind them all together run through the banking system. And once people understand the fractional reserve banking and they see that it is not just a disaster, but it is intentionally created as a disaster. And then they realize, well, hey, why didn't I ever learn about this in school? Well, you didn't learn about it in school because they don't want you to know about it. Because if you knew about how screwed up the mechanism was, you'd want it something else.
Right.
Maybe that's where cryptocurrencies come in. I don't know.
Well, as my friend Nelson Thal, who was just on the program with me a while ago, likes to say, the Federal Reserve is about as federal as FedEx.
Exactly. And that is something that people to this day don't understand. They don't believe. In the United States, I remember being taught that it was quasi-public. It was sort of run, it had parts of it were private, parts of it were public, but that's as far as they described it. It's not. It's a private bank. It is not there for. Not only is it a private bank, but the Federal Reserve in the United States has majority of the ownership is in European banks. So it's like the money in the United States, but the Americans are very dumbed down in terms of our knowledge of how the whole money system works and how that works. Our money is created by the Federal Reserve, a private institution, and then loaned to us at interest.
Right. They created out of thin air. They created out of thin air as debt. As debt. It can never be totally repaid because there's not enough.
It's like if you go back to the first $100 that's created, I'll create $100. You got to give me 106 back next year for 6% interest. Great. When it comes due, you've got your 100. Where's the 6? Well, it doesn't exist. Well, I'll loan you another 100. Okay, great. And so that perpetuates the machine, and then you start to realize the mechanics of it. It can never be repaid, and it is a trap. And then someone with half a brain will say, well, why are we borrowing the money? Why don't we just do it ourselves? Isn't that what the Treasury is? Yes, that's what the Treasury should be doing. But it got sold out 100 years ago by Woodrow Wilson, and he knew it. He knew it when he was doing it, and then afterwards he confessed to it and just said, "I've sold this great nation out." Well, yeah, you did, but don't act like you got fooled on it. This was devised. The Creature from Jekyll Island, a great book about that, how it was done in secret, and that was, what a scam. They have to have just been laughing, going, I can't believe we convinced them to do this. But that's what happens when you've got a lot of money and you've got some political influence. Yeah, kind of rushed through the House during Christmas break, much like Obamacare. Yeah, exactly. Well, and speaking of Obamacare, I think one thing that we have to acknowledge in terms of just insane, and then, but at the same time, kind of funny, if you allow yourself to go down this path, is that Obama put a guy in charge of science, a guy named John P. Holdren. Yes. I don't know if you're familiar. Oh, yes, he's quite a card, isn't he? This guy is a certified lunatic. In 1977, he wrote a book called Eugenics and the Depopulation Agenda. And I have to just bring this up because people haven't heard about it. This guy was in charge of Obama's science department. But in 1977, I'm not kidding, these were the points in his book. Number one, women could be forced to abort their pregnancies whenever they wanted to or not. The population at large could be sterilized by infertility drugs intentionally put into the nation's drinking water and in food. Gee, I wonder if that's happened. Mm-hmm. Single mothers and teen mothers should have their babies seized from them against their will and given away to other couples. People who contribute to social deterioration, whatever that means, can be required by law to exercise reproductive responsibility. In other words, they could be compelled to have abortions or be sterilized. And then he said he also wanted a transnational planetary regime that should assume control of the global economy and also dictate the most intimate details of Americans' lives, include using an armed international police force. So the guy in charge of the science for the 8 years of Obama, I don't know if he was there for all 8 years, but he was there for part of Obama's 8 years, put it in writing in the 70s that he wants your water sterilized and your food sterilized, and he wants you to have forced abortions, and then he wants to have an armed international police force. I don't know.
It sounds like he was the one giving dictation when they carved out on the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah. The Georgia Guidestones I have described as 10 Commandments plus Stonehenge plus Waffle House. They are nuts. And yeah, so you see these things and you go, John Holdren is crazy. And you kind of have to laugh at it. I mean, no, obviously there's nothing funny about forced abortions, but when you write that book and then you stand behind it and go, absolutely, this is my platform. I'm going to run on forced abortions for the next 50 years. That's nuts. And the fact that somebody said, you know what? We need John Holdren to be on your side. That's a good idea. Let's have him on your science department. Yeah, the crazy guy that wants to sterilize everyone. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, you see, that's a perfect illustration of how a progressivism, actually, the progressive movement leads to fascism. And I, give a great deal of credit, obviously, most of the credit to people like Dinesh D'Souza for finally, laying this out there, that for so long people thought that fascism was an extension of right-wing ideology, and it's quite the opposite. Progressivism.
Yeah, it sneaks up on you.
Yeah. And this attitude of the science czar, I think, it's pernicious, but it is pervasive. I think it's so widespread. This whole ideology is being taught in the public schools, and it's watered down somewhat. But the idea that humanity is a cancer that needs to be eradicated, and combined with this sort of pagan worship of Mother Earth. Worshipping the creation and how the planet would be so much better off if humans weren't around anymore. This is abuse. This is being taught in the public schools.
Yeah, and there's something that is definitely not being taught in the public schools, frankly, the private schools either, and that is. And this is sort of a fringe belief or a fringe understanding, but I feel like it's important. There is organized religion, and that has its place, and some people are into it and some people aren't. I personally, I'm not into it. But there is a suppression of knowledge about it. It's been a dumbing. First of all, there's been a dumbing down physically through whether it's fluoridation of the water, the food, just poor health, television. There's all these things, and we're all guilty of it. I certainly am. But there's been a physical dumbing down, but then there's also been sort of a repression of some of these things, like understanding. I use a lot of quotes from Terence McKenna talking about, he does mushroom, or he did, he'd go and do some mushrooms and do ayahuasca, and some people kind of roll their eyes and go, it's like Grateful Dead hippie stuff. It is, to an extent. There's quite a bit to be learned from that. For one, you learn exactly how incredibly small we really are and how amazing, the world is, and how confusing and how we don't have it figured out. We might think we do, but there is so much more to this universe and to this world than what we physically see and what we think and what we hear. We're like deaf and blind in this universe. And so that has definitely been taken out, and sort of the people that are into that have been marginalized. And I get it, because it's kind of funny to make fun of them, but there is some real value in that. There's some real value in people sort of backing away from this society that we've got and saying, there's more to this. There's more. We can, there's there's the Jim Jones, of course, go live in the woods and have a cult, and of course we're not advocating that. But there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot that we don't know, and I think that it's important. When I did mushrooms in college the first time, it changed my life. It made me, and I honestly haven't done it since college, but it changed my life. It made me realize, whoa, this is nuts. There's a lot out there. There's a lot going on, and I felt a little bit small, but then I also kind of felt connected to it as well. So to me, it was an overwhelmingly great experience. And so I put that in the book, and I put that in there specifically because it's sort of underrepresented in the mainstream. So I wanted to give a little bit of give a little bit of love to it. And I'm also saying be respectful of it. But for sure, this is not like it's not like a party scene. This is like there's major power there.
It is a sacrament in certain traditions. I was just thinking as you're talking about that and psilocybin and LSD and how there's one probably idea that the CIA wish that they could take back. All of these LSD experiments at places like Princeton and Harvard, where they were trying to, I guess, sort of replicate a lot of what the mind control experiments the Nazis were doing, and MK Ultra and so forth, and using sort of microdosing people with with LSD. But it became sort of a double-edged sword because they wanted to use it to control, but it ended up, as you say, this whole age of Aquarius and opening up people's minds, and then people started, saying, wait a minute, there's something going on here that's not quite right. I don't think that's what the CIA had intended originally.
No, I think they brought it out their playbook of let's use this to control people's minds, but it went a little bit off the rails, and so it's sort of, that's an example of something that sort of blends from scientific control. There's kind of a spiritual control. When I came up with sort of the 8 tentacles of the octopus, the ones I chose were military control, governmental control, covert control, physical, financial, media, spiritual, and scientific. And some of these sort of blend from one to the other. They're not limited to one another. But when we get into, we're talking about just plain scientific control of the world, there's a guy named Dr. Russell Blaylock. He's a retired U.S. neurosurgeon and an author, and he's great. You can find videos of him on YouTube, but there's a great quote, and I want to read this. He says, "We're developing a society because of these different toxins are known to affect brain functions. We're seeing a society that's not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society, so everyone is sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ that are totally dependent on government, and then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And then very few people of high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this out. And that's what they want. So, you kind of piece it together as to why they're so insistent on spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society." And I heard that and I went, wow, he nailed it. It's just a sort of big group of sort of blah. And they don't excel, and so they're easy to control. Just a big herd of sheep, sort of. And they're being
trained as serfs for the new global economy, where they will stack boxes for cheap Chinese imports. Yeah, and it's a shame. And I don't know that's a new thing. I think that maybe you mentioned serfs. I think maybe you can go back hundreds of years and see that there was always sort of that pyramid of some at the top, most of the people at the bottom, and it's a shame. I don't know that it has to be that way, though. I think there's room for the people at the bottom to at least improve their intelligence. My God, they gotta stop eating all this crappy GMO foods, and they gotta quit injecting themselves with poisons, and they gotta quit doing a bunch of things if they want to excel. But I think we might be at a breaking point where it's too late. It might be a little bit too late for some people. Never too late, Charlie.
I hope.
The octopus sorry, I just lost my screen here. The Octopus of Global Control. Charlie Robinson is with us. Since we're talking about education, you include, again, we should point out, the Octopus of Global Control is just filled with tremendous quotes, over 500 quotes, and you visit or revisit the late, great George Carlin a number of times. And some of these are on YouTube, some of these rants. Yeah. Later in his life, he became far less funny and really, really angry. He sort of crossed that line, and he talks a lot about the education system. Just sort of revisit that with us.
Yeah, well, it's true. He got to the point where he just said, I got nothing at stake here. I'm just watching the show. He says, when you're born in this world, you get a ticket to the carnival, and when you're born in America, you get a front row seat. And it's true. And he did get a little bit more sort of bitter towards the end. But God, you listen to his rantings from 2005. And like you said, you can find it on YouTube. He's got the all black shirt, the black pants, and he's just nailing it. He's so smart, and it's funny. And it's funny because it's true. And you go, oh, that's terrible. Oh, it's terrible. But it's funny because it's really happening. Yeah, funny that you would find like one of the great philosophers of all time would be just like an older, angry comedian who just happens to have a really good beat on the way things are going. I mean, for me, George Carlin was definitely instrumental in sort of waking me up. He did it in a way that I sort of aspired to kind of be like, which was tell a funny story. Tell a story that's true, but make it funny, and then people will laugh, but they'll still get the meaning of it. I think Jon Stewart does that, has done that really well, to tell, a funny story, and you're laughing at it, and you get it, and it comes to you as comedy, but it's also news as well. But like to me, probably the most important person in my like awakening was John Perkins.
Yes.
I was on my way to 2007, I was on my way to Thailand for a scuba diving trip. Right as I was leaving, my buddy said, take this book. I think you'll like it. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I read it. It changed my life. I thought I had it figured out. I didn't know anything. I knew about 9/11, and I had an idea about a lot of things. That was really the missing piece of the puzzle for me. It just explained how the banking industry, not even necessarily the U.S. banking, but the World Bank, will intentionally create infrastructure projects in these third world countries like Ecuador or Honduras or wherever, and they will intentionally put these countries into debt slavery. They'll create a hydroelectric power plant and say, hey, it's going to generate electricity. You're going to have all these 10,000 villagers will be able to have light. They'll learn how to read at night and all these things. Well, they put a lot of money into a couple of different people's pockets, and that would grease the wheels and made it happen. But the system was rigged from the beginning. It was never going to generate enough revenue to cover the debt, and now they're trapped.
Right, and so they have to sell off their assets at bargain basement prices to all of the players, the owners.
So you got the politicians that say, well, I can work with you, but you're going to have to vote our way in this new UN resolution that's coming up. Fine, okay. Then you've got the other people saying, well, you're going to have to sell your lumber industry to my buddy's firm over here, and that'll raise some money and that'll help. So, it's crooked and it's dirty. And I remember being in business school at USC, and one of my teachers said, by the way, if you guys ever start a company that manufactures a product and you go to Walmart and you pitch Walmart on it and they go, wow, we like that. We'll take 50,000 of them. And you go, oh my God, I can't believe I got this huge, I got to borrow $1 million. I'll go get. She said, don't do it. It's a trap. You'll go borrow the money. You'll make the 50,000 widgets. You'll deliver it. They'll say, we don't want it. And you'll say, what are you talking about? We have a deal. And they'll say, nah, well, we got lawyers. We'll string you out forever. I'll tell you what, though, we'll take it off your hands. I guess we'll help you out. We'll take it off your hands for 5 cents on the dollar. And she said, remember that and don't ever fall into that trap. And I remember that. And when I read John Perkins' book, I went, oh, that's another aspect of this. I get it. So
yeah.
I give him a ton of credit for that. And so I come back from Thailand, I'm reading this book. I'm really involved in it. I'm living in Las Vegas. I'm working in the new home sale industry, and I am living The Big Short. I am in that market, and I am watching mortgage fraud on an industrial scale in front of me. I am watching it. I'm having my boss say, we're going to do this. We're going to offer this program. We're going to do it this way, this way, this way. I raise my hand and I say, I have a question. Have we cleared this with our legal department? I have a real estate license. I can't have that at stake. I can't have that risk. It would devastate me. And I'll never forget his word. He said, I'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. I went, we're in trouble. We're all going to jail. And I for calling attention to that, I was fired. So
there you go.
Look, so I see this. I'm reading John Perkins' book. I'm living The Big Short. I'm watching this fraud, and and I'm understanding 9/11, and it's all hitting me at the same time, and I'm going, God, is it all just a rigged game? I mean, are we really just stuck?
You know, Charlie, my favorite quote from the book actually is yours, and you just mentioned Walmart, and the line is something like, talking about the dumbing down of America. We should say North America. Canada's in the same boat.
Okay, I didn't want to pile on. We love Canada. I don't want to pile on, but I mean, okay.
You said we're circumnavigating the local Walmart like Magellan with cankles. What was it? Compression socks and an oxygen tank. Oh, yeah, brilliant line. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was that was from my many times at Walmart. You fall into that trap. You go, I don't want to go to Walmart. This is bad. And then you go, but it's half the price. I have who do I have to take care of first? My family or the rest of the world? Well, I want to take care of the rest of the world too, but my family comes first. And if it's cheaper, you buy it. And then you find out you understand how the trap is set.
You don't need to die on that hill, though. You don't need to die on that hill. There are other battles to be fought. Listen, we have to do this again, Shirley. We're going to wind things down here, but I want to have you on again. And there's so much to get into, obviously. And I really appreciate you spending some time with me.
Thank you. Let me just real fast. If you guys are Amazon Kindle Unlimited members, you can go on Amazon. You can read the book for free. I get 1/1,000,000th of a penny for every page that's read. It's a great deal for me, believe me.
Oh dear.
But you can buy. It's available as a paperback. It's also available as a Kindle. But if you have a Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. And if you're not a member of any of those, you can go on there and I think read the first 30 pages. For free. If you like it, buy it. If you don't, that's fine.
My listeners are capitalists and appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit. So I'm going to encourage them to go out and buy the paperback. You know, I'm of that generation. I'm tactile. I need a dog-eared copy on my nightstand.
It's thick. I understand that, and I appreciate that. I did put a lot of effort in the book, and I'm not ashamed to sell it. I feel good about it. I think there's a lot of value in it, especially, like I said, if there's somebody in your family that is sort of like doesn't quite understand this, and you think it might put them over the edge. It might help. You've done everything you can. You're done trying to explain it to them. It might help. It might put them over the edge. It certainly won't hurt.
Well, for those people that appreciate Jim Marrs and their entree into this whole arena was ruled by secrecy, this is a nice companion piece, I think, for that. The Octopus of Global Control. Charlie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And as Jim Marrs said, it ain't a conspiracy theory if you can prove it.
There you go. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Well, before I dim the lights in my little studio beneath the stairs, I'm going to give you a heads up on what's coming up on episode 17 of Conspiracy Unlimited. Before we get to that, now that we're nicely into 2018, let me ask you, is weight loss on your wish list? It certainly is on mine. Unfortunately, the commitment to weight loss often fades. Why is that? Many people simply give up in the first 90 days. The key is having the right mindset. Getting thin and staying that way lies in our thought processes, and hypnotherapy can make all the difference. Now, clinical hypnotherapist Dr. Steve G. Jones has created a set of 5 audio hypnotic sessions that apply the power of hypnosis to reprogram the mind and replace bad habits with vibrant, positive new habits to help you achieve natural and long-lasting weight loss. Weight loss hypnotherapy really works, and it's available now at a special discount. Isn't it time to lose those extra pounds? Check out weight loss hypnotherapy right now at smartclicksavings.com. That's smartclicksavings.com. Coming up next time on Conspiracy Unlimited. It was in September 1978 when Rodney Alcala was selected on the dating game as the winner by the Pretty Bachelorette. Every viewer agreed he was the perfect choice, but behind his handsome face, the successful photographer Alcala was in the middle of a killing sexual rampage. Alan R. Warren discusses the true story of the game show killer. Until next time, I'm Richard Syrett. So long for now.
A new Conspiracy Unlimited with Richard Syrett drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at conspiracyunlimitedpodcast.com. Blow your mind. That is all for now. Oh, and remember to share and give a 5-star review because we have huge egos and need love. We're like cats. We need constant